man must know when he is beaten and when to stand and fight. A man must be strong, but not let pride consume him. A man must do his duty, not merely follow orders. A man must love his friends and urge them to greater heights. A man must know his place, even when he does not want or deserve it. A man must have honor, not for himself, but for those around him. Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World came out in 2003 when I was about 10, and I watched it that year, or at least I distinctly remember cheering for it at the Academy Awards in February of 2004, along with Return of the King, of course. And it actually won 2 Oscars, which meant something back then. Point being, I was young when I first saw this film, and I will be forever grateful to my parents for letting me watch such an incredible movie at that formative age, despite Master and Commander earning every inch of its PG-13 rating. At the time, I was naturally in it, largely for the excitement and action. The idea that there were kids barely my age going to war aboard a frigate was enchanting.
Just to break it up.
That's why I read Midshipman Quinn approximately 18,000 times before I hit my teens. Here, I have proof. Look at that. Look at that. That's love right there. But now, I am older, I am taller, I have less hair, and I am wiser. My youthful naivete replaced by...
Let fly! Let fly!
On yourself! Where is the ball now?
Yeah, as I was saying, now that 30 is in the rear view mirror, I like to think I have a newfound appreciation for Master and Commander, and in particular, how it portrays masculinity.
The simple fact is we were soundly beaten.
Now, if you ask 1,000 people to define masculinity, you will likely receive 1,001 different answers. But at its basest level, masculinity is simply the quality of being masculine, of being male. Naturally, we then compare this to the feminine, to the quality of being female, and so many people may think of masculinity in terms of strength and confidence, which isn't wrong, but it is incomplete. Sure, men are stronger and more confident than women, but they're also taller and heavier than them. Does this mean a 6'7", 350-pound NFL right guard is necessarily the pinnacle of masculinity? Hardly, but don't tell him I said that. I find it much more helpful to define masculinity not by that which is uniquely masculine, as such traits are exceedingly rare, but rather that which makes us good men. Think of masculinity existing on a spectrum. On one end is the coward, the weakling, the simp, if you will, a man defined by his lack of strength and virtue. On the other extreme, we find men who are abrasive, rude, arrogant, and domineering. In the middle, the golden mean, one might say, we find men who exemplify true masculinity. They are courageous but not foolish, confident but not conceited, dutiful but not sniveling. Of course, it is possible for men to fail in their masculinity from both ends of the spectrum at the same time. They may be incredibly brash in their words online, but utter weaklings when they actually have to stand up for themselves and their beliefs in person. We need not bother with such people. The beauty of stories such as Master and Commander is that they show us truths about what men can be. The premier example in this film is, of course, Captain Jack Aubrey. Yeah, there were 2 movies featuring a Captain Jack that came out within a few months of each other in 2003. Go figure. Anyway, we meet this Captain Jack just moments before his ship is hit with a devastating broadside from an enemy vessel they can barely see. At first, Aubrey orders his men to bring them into the fray, as this is the French privateer that he has been ordered to capture, sink, or burn.
Lay me alongside a pistol shot.
It quickly becomes apparent, however, that this is not a battle the HMS Surprise can win. So, what does Lucky Jack do? He flees.
Put us in that fog, Tom.
This happens again when the Acheron pops up on their tail, appearing on the horizon as if from thin air. Though his fellow officers proclaim there is no alternative but to turn and fight, Captain Jack pushes his men and his ship to the limit, running with all speed until nightfall, at which point he deploys a decoy and slips into the darkness, unseen. Is that cowardly? A true man would stand his ground, or, water, and fight, right? No. A man must know when he is beaten and when to stand and fight. Courage is good, but it is not everything. If not tempered by prudence, the brave man becomes foolhardy and reckless. To quote Faramir, there are some perils from which a man must flee. He was speaking of temptation, of perils of the heart, but those are not so different than battles fought with powder and shot. In any circumstance, whether the battle be physical, mental, or spiritual, we must know our own capabilities, our own limits, and act accordingly. And yes, sometimes that means we should turn tail and run so that we may live to fight another day. That is not cowardice, that is wisdom. Now, if a man always ran, he would rightly be deemed a coward, but that is not Lucky Jack. He did not flee because he feared death, but because he was determined to engage with the enemy on his terms, not theirs.
This is the second time he's done this to me. There will not be a third.
He makes good on his word, captaining the Surprise masterfully, bringing her up on the Acheron's tail, ready and eager to do battle with the foe. Captain Jack has, it seems, proven himself more capable and cunning than his counterpart aboard the French privateer. Man must be strong, but not let pride consume him. Despite his superb skill, Jack is not a master of the winds and seas, and experiences a stroke of bad luck as his ship is caught in a gale which lets her prey slip away and throws one of her own men overboard. Earlier in the movie, at dinner in the captain's cabin, Jack asked his friend Stephen, the ship's doctor, to choose between two weevils that were hanging out near a piece of bread, a fun little detail regarding naval life in the early 1800s. Stephen chose the larger of the pair and fell right into Jack's trap.
One must always choose the lesser of two weevils.
What was a resoundingly hilarious joke if you were drunk, anyway, now becomes a haunting ethical dilemma. Do you cut loose the wreckage, the only lifeline available to that poor man being tossed about by the raging waves? Or do you leave it be, let it drag you down and risk losing your ship with all hands? It is ultimately no dilemma at all. He must choose to save the lives of the nearly 200 men and boys still aboard the Surprise. Morally speaking, this is incredibly clear-cut, a perfect example of the principle of double effect. The death of Worley was a foreseen but unintended consequence of cutting loose the wreckage, an action necessary to prevent far more deaths. Psychologically speaking, things are not so simple. Such was the life of a sea captain, a battlefield general, or any man who has ever led men into danger. The strength of such a man lies in his ability to exercise good judgment and make difficult decisions, even when that decision may be misconstrued or unpopular. The hidden danger within such an ability, however, is that it might, little by little, lead a cunning tactician such as Captain Aubrey to think of his men as little more than pieces on a chessboard. Since it is inevitable that some of them will have to be sacrificed, why bother seeing them as men? Would that not only make it more difficult to make the hard choice when it comes necessary? Yes, it would. That is good, that is necessary. No matter how inevitable choosing to cut loose the wreckage may have been, it is only in Jack's hesitation to give the order that we see his love for that man whom he must condemn to be lost at sea. The rest of his men, at least those near enough, had to witness that reluctance, had to know that he cared. Men will not follow a leader who views their lives as disposable and replaceable. They need to know that should they die, he will mourn them. Unfortunately, the captain of a ship is not free to mourn as he might like. As much as it is important for his men to know that he is human, he must also present a visage of strength. He must be their rock, their sanctuary, their bastion.
Stand tall on the quarterdeck, son, all of us.
So it is only in the privacy of his own cabin with his friend at his side that Captain Jack can show, even in his posture and expression, his distress at having sentenced one of his men to a watery death. I love that we don't even hear Jack express his remorse to Stephen. Perhaps he did, perhaps he did not. Instead, we enter the scene as the doctor is attempting to console his friend, knowing reassurances need to be spoken, even if the very same thoughts are already running through Jack's mind.
That young man was a casualty of war.
No matter how strong, how capable, or how smart we are, there will inevitably be some challenge that exposes our weaknesses and our faults. Even if no one else sees them, it would be foolish for us not to acknowledge their existence. Willful ignorance of our own shortcomings inevitably leads to disaster. Avoiding such a catastrophe is much easier if we have a friend at our side, one who is willing to tell us uncomfortable truths.
And chasing this larger, faster ship beginning to smack of pride.
Now, I don't mean to suggest that Captain Aubrey has dragged his ship and crew on this adventure purely to stroke his own ego. Not at all. But whenever these two friends argue, I find that they are somehow both in the right. These are two well-intentioned, virtuous, dedicated men who have a long-lasting friendship that has weathered many a storm, physical and otherwise. They can speak freely with each other because they know their bond will survive this conflict just as it has many others before. In his cabin with Stephen, Jack is allowed to be a man, not an icon. And men are, sadly, prideful creatures. Lucky Jack is no exception. You don't earn a reputation like his by being anything other than incredibly competitive and obsessively driven. It would be nigh on impossible not to be at least a little prideful when you are as competent and well-loved as he is. That is hardly the only reason he continues his pursuit of the Acheron, however. Affect him though it may, it does not consume him. His chosen course of action is influenced far more by his sense of duty than it is his need to win.
I exceeded my orders a long time ago.
A man must do his duty, not merely follow orders. There's a distinction that must be made here. One could claim that following orders is doing one's duty, and doing one's duty is following orders. I don't believe that to be so, and Master and Commander clearly doesn't either. Put simply, a man's duty is what he owes, and his orders are specific instructions on how to fulfill that duty. Duty is greater than orders. Orders derive from duty, not the other way around. You can follow orders and not fulfill your duty, not fully. It's easy enough to put this in context of our own lives. We might follow the letter of the law rather than its spirit. We might do what is technically required from us at our jobs, but not perform to our true capability. For my fellow Christians, it might mean following the commandments, but never sharing the gospel. A good man does not blindly follow orders. He asks why they were given to him, what purpose they might serve. If the orders are grossly unjust, he disobeys. If the orders are righteous, he may very well exceed them, seeing past their boundaries to the cause beyond. A lesser man would have turned around upon having reached the Brazilian coast. He had fulfilled his orders. He could wash his hands of the matter and go home. Why risk his life and those of his crew chasing an enemy ship beyond where he had been commanded? We find our answer as the crew of the Surprise are about to disembark onto one of the Galapagos Islands with Dr. Stephen at their head, eager to observe, study, and collect the local flora and fauna. I did love that Stephen's field of study is everything in nature, from botany to zoology to amputations to cranial surgery. When you're the only dedicated man of science aboard a warship, you gotta know it all, I guess. His dreams are crushed, unfortunately, by the discovery of a lifeboat containing the few members of an English whaling vessel who had managed to escape capture when their ship was attacked by the Acheron. We'll get to the ensuing argument in a moment, but I had to point out that this is why Captain Jack pursued his prey around the Horn and into the Pacific. Yes, he has a duty to his men, but he also has one to his countrymen who sail the Western Ocean, unaware of the French privateer lusting after the oil they harvested. If not him, then who? It is not enough for a man to do as he is told. Our duty extends far beyond that which other people demand of us. We must demand much more of ourselves. Again, the captain's scourge is that doing so also requires him to demand the men who serve under him give more than their orders explicitly require. This includes Stephen, who is singularly distraught at the thought of his nature trip being cancelled.
Hurrying past inestimable wonders bent solely on destruction, I shall say...
A man must love his friends and urge them to greater heights. Our modern world has a profound misunderstanding of the word love. We think it an emotion of attraction, a flighty one whose absence means we no longer owe anything to the person we once loved. That is the giving end of love. On the receiving end, we insist that those who say they love us affirm us in every aspect, that they not dare suggest we are misguided. This stems from society being overrun by postmodern thought, where truth is defined by the experience of the individual. Real love is not so fleeting, nor does it coddle and indulge. Take, for example, these snippets of conversation between Jack and Stephen.
See, I'm rather understanding of mutineers.
Viewing the world through your microscope is your prerogative. This is a ship of war.
I shall say nothing of the corruption of power or...
We do not have time for your damned hobbies, sir!
If you were to post those exchanges, out of context, of course, to the subreddit r/relationships, you would be told in no uncertain terms, that it is time to sever the friendship once and for all. And you'd also probably be told that your friend is being abusive because the bar for such a term is so very low on the internet. That is, of course, absolute nonsense. If your friend does not challenge you in any way, if he does nothing more than speak agreeable, mollifying words to you, why bother with him at all? That's not a friend, that's a sycophant. He doesn't love you, he just likes being around you. What's more, I would dare say you don't love him, or you would tell him to stop being such a yes man. Jack and Stephen's friendship could hardly be further from such things, and yes, at times they do stray too far in the opposite direction. Stephen being too comfortable criticizing Jack's command, and Jack too quick to label his friend's studies as mere recreation. One can hardly imagine things being otherwise, however, seeing as they have been cooped up on a ship for months on end, but still, they owe a duty of filial love to one another. For Captain Jack, that means putting aside his pursuit of the Acheron after Stephen is a victim of friendly fire, ordering the Surprise to land in the Galapagos and give the Doctor his chance to explore the natural wonders of the islands.
Tell me this wasn't on my account.
I just needed to stretch my legs.
World-class writing, that. As much as Stephen longed to go ashore and collect every new specimen he laid his eyes on, he could hardly bear the thought that his friend renounced his duty just to give him a holiday. Infuriate him though it might at times, Jack's steadfast adherence to the requirements of the service is an essential part of the captain. Though we ought to call our friends to greater heights, the idea of changing something so fundamental to their nature should give us pause, especially when that part of them is inherently virtuous, as Jack's is. And Captain Jack, well, there was a time and a place to pursue the Acheron, and there is a time and a place to ensure he does not destroy a lifelong friendship. Not to mention the requirements of the service would be far more difficult to see fulfilled should the ship's doctor die of an infection, or even should he survive, spend weeks recuperating below deck, rather than getting the chance to recover on dry land and in a warm sun after pulling the bullet out of his own side. Talk about masculinity, my goodness. Though not without its turmoil, the friendship between Stephen and Jack is one of my absolute favorites on film. They are such vastly different men in almost every aspect, from temperament to chosen profession. I'm not certain. Maybe the book says, but I would guess that the only reason Stephen has confined himself to this wooden prison, as he terms it, is because Jack asked him to. Perhaps he was, those many months ago in England, promised a chance to venture into lands previously untouched and unseen by mankind, but he had to know what the cost would be, and he chose to pay it. Because at the end of the day, the Doctor is not here for the beetles, the iguanas, or even the flightless cormorants. He is here for his friend. And Stephen proves it just moments after catching a glimpse of that all-intriguing bird on the far side of the island, having spent the better part of a day trekking across it, disregarding his own condition, intent on nothing less than this incredible discovery. What he finds in the cove below is not his prey, but that of his friend. It should be noted that this is not merely Stephen returning the favor after Jack stopped in the Galapagos to stretch his legs. Certainly, the captain's generosity and kindness made this decision easier, but the Doctor does not rush back across the island with all speed just to repay Jack. That's not to say that we do not owe our friends anything, we absolutely do, but rather that if your friendship involves a careful measuring of giving and taking, neither friend willing to give more than he receives, you do not have a friend, you have a business partner. Ultimately, despite all their disagreements and strong words, these two men remember their duties to the ship's crew, to their country, and to one another. I can hardly think of a better example of masculine friendship in fiction that doesn't involve hobbits. At the end of the day, Jack and Stephen know that they can rely on each other, that when the crucial moment comes, they will stand shoulder to shoulder, prepared to face the world together. That is where a friend belongs, at his friend's side. A man must know his place, even if he does not want or deserve it. Stephen certainly struggles with this, as the position of ship's doctor comes with a whole host of undesirable certainties, but he is not alone. The third and final cabin argument between him and Jack takes place shortly after Seaman Nagel shouldered aside Midshipman Hallam rather than saluting and making way for the officer. Jack witnessed the exchange and ordered Nagel's flogging, to which the Doctor objects, but the captain insists is necessary.
Men must be governed. Often not wisely, I will grant you, but they must be governed nonetheless.
Again, the role a ship captain must play is hardly a desirable one, and Jack expresses in this scene his reluctance to punish the man who helped him save the Surprise from sinking, even though it meant condemning Nagel's good friend to death. But he knows his place, as a man must. There's little more that can be said regarding Jack and Stephen's approach to this principle, so let us turn our attention to the man whose failure to know his place led us to this unfortunate situation. Midshipman Hallam is one of the first characters we meet in Master and Commander, as he is the officer of the watch when the Acheron's bell is heard, and he is the one to spot its outline in the dense fog. But he hesitates, unsure whether to call the crew to combat positions, until a younger and more confident officer makes that decision for him.
We shall beat to quarters!
Apparently, this lack of confidence is not unusual for Mr. Hallam. We learn after the incident with Nagel that he has twice failed to pass the lieutenant's exam, and so remains a midshipman, sharing the rank with youngsters such as Lord William Blakeney. The most significant reason for this failure, it seems, is that Hallam simply does not know how to lead. As Captain Jack points out, his attempts to befriend the men will only backfire. We see this when he attempts to join in on their song, prompting them to cease singing altogether. The seamen know their place, and they expect the officers to know theirs, and the two can never be one. It's an unfortunate reality, but so it must be. Is it fair that young men from upper social strata were compelled to be officers if they wanted to serve, pushed into leadership even if they had no real propensity for it? No. Life isn't fair. A man ought not to concern himself with fairness, with social and cultural forces well beyond his control or influence. Instead, he must make the best of the proverbial hand he is dealt. As for Hallam, he is perhaps dealt the worst hand of all. Beyond his general lack of aptitude in his role as an officer, he also becomes the target of scorn, as the crew comes to see him as the cause of all their bad luck, from the Acheron's ambush to Worley's drowning to the windless doldrums in which they are now mired.
That is from the Bible, the story of the Jonah.
Their superstitions are, of course, nothing more than that, but their behavior is unfortunately quite common. Faced with dire circumstances beyond our control, we often seek someone or something to blame. We seek order and reason in all things, and find it even when mere chance is far more likely. Such is the case here, and it's clearly depicted as a weakness, something men do because they cannot stand the thought of being consigned to their fate by pure, unadulterated bad luck. They want to do something about it. That luck must have a source, even if the parallel they draw makes no sense whatsoever, because Jonah sinned gravely by disobeying God's direct command to go to Nineveh, whereas Midshipman Hallam is just kind of bad at his job. Did he fail to rise to the occasion, to the demands of his position as a man ought? Absolutely. But he hardly deserves to be blamed for all the Surprise's ills. The worst failure in this present circumstance, however, might very well belong to Captain Jack.
Sailors can abide a great deal, but not a Jonah.
It's a momentary lapse, an almost offhanded comment, one that Jack likely did not mean to be overheard, used as he is to speaking with Stephen in the privacy of his own cabin, but the damage is done. We don't see it, but no doubt word spreads that Lucky Jack believes Mr. Hallam to be the source of their misfortune, eventually reaching the midshipman himself and driving him to despair. Jack knew better than to say such things. He knew his position demanded he support his officers, and his mistake shows us why he is so demanding of himself. The captain of a ship cannot let even a single idle word pass his lips, or it may have dire, fatal consequences. You might think that is far too heavy a burden to place on a man, and you would hardly be wrong, but so it must be. Life is demanding, life is not fair, life forces cruel choices. The choice that Captain Jack makes at Hallam's funeral, however, is one that shows his repentance and regret at whatever hand he may have had in the younger man's death. Given a Bible open to the book of Jonah, he closes the good book and instead issues a reminder to his crew.
Simple truth is, not all of us become the men we once hoped we might be.
A man must have honor, not for himself, but for those around him. What does it mean to have honor? Not now, Zuko. Again, ask 100 men and you will receive 101 different answers. Is honor something you have inherently, or something others give you? Is it your social reputation, or a measure of your character? I would venture that, according to Master and Commander, honor is your good name. As Captain Jack alludes to in that scene, it is something bestowed by God.
We are all God's creatures.
a gift given freely, but one which we can, and often do, choose to reject. Honor cannot merely mean being held in high esteem. The master of a pack of thieves and murderers has no honor, no matter how much his underlings may adore him. A man's good name is not a subjective measure, not purely anyway. Yes, the subjective view others have of him does matter, but it must be derived from his objective qualities, his courage, strength, loyalty, and virtue of every kind. An upright man still has his honor, even if those around him fail to recognize it, though it certainly is better if they do, as is the case here. Jack Aubrey's honor is not a purely internal matter. Given the nature of his station, it must be observed and recognized by those around him, or else they would refuse to follow him, would refuse to risk life and limb aboard the Surprise. The captain of a warship, of course, is hardly the only sort of man of whom honor is demanded. Regardless of our own station in life, we must seek to be honorable. And yes, when you boil it down, honor means nothing more than being a good man. Our skills, virtues, traits, and talents, words, and actions all combine to create our good name. But it is the why that matters most. Why pursue virtue? Why seek wisdom, prudence, and courage? Why strengthen our bodies and sharpen our minds? Why do our duty, even when others would not ask it of us? Why have the humility to know and accept our place in the world? Why love and challenge our friends? Why do we seek to become good men? Is it for our own glory, so we can proclaim to the world how mighty and righteous we are? I think not.
Safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack.
I love Captain Jack's reaction when Alan starts up that song. He acknowledges the gesture, a bit abashed, and then just sips his wine before eventually joining in on the merriment. This clearly isn't why he does what he does. The admiration of his men, which he has and clearly deserves, is of little concern. It matters only in that it is the result of their trust in him, which matters more than anything. Because ultimately, a leader is a servant. It is the captain's duty to see his country defended and his home kept safe, and to protect and preserve the lives of his men whenever possible. No man will put his life on the line for a leader he does not trust in that regard. That is why Jack's words at Hallam's funeral are of utmost importance. He loves all the sailors who serve on the Surprise, even the men who are held in low esteem by their companions. A man of honor must serve those who honor him, or he is no man at all. He must also honor those men, and by that, I mean recognize their talents and virtues and hold them to that standard. Jack does this twice as the final battle with the Acheron approaches, first charging midshipman, now acting third lieutenant, Calamy with freeing the imprisoned whalers from the privateer's brig, then giving command of the ship to the young Blakeney once the boarding has begun.
Come on to the ship. Thank you, sir.
Honor cannot live and die within one man's heart. It must be passed down from generation to generation, the heroic example of one man inspiring many more to live in like manner. Lucky Jack knows this better than most. The sad reality, of course, is that survival is not guaranteed, that these honorable young men may die in the line of duty, that they might never live to be an example for those who would come after. Such is the case for Peter Calamy. As for William Blakeney, well, he already lost an arm, but that didn't seem to stop Lord Nelson, nor even slow him down. Calamy asked Captain Jack about Nelson earlier in the movie, about what the legendary admiral was like in person. After an amusing bit about passing the salt, Jack recounts the story Nelson told him about how, when offered a boat cloak on a cold night, he declined.
His zeal for king and country kept him warm.
It's a story that sounds self-congratulatory and naively zealous, and Jack admits as much, were it to come from another man.
But with Nelson, you felt your heart glow.
That is what honor can do. When a man is genuine, sincere, and pure of heart, his good name cannot help but enlighten every word of his, and those words will embolden the souls of those who trust in him.
And though we be on the far side of the world, this ship is our home. This ship is England.
There is nothing more masculine than men who are willing to die for that which they love, for those whom they love. This is why we turn to stories of war time and time again, not because violence and bloodshed are beautiful or glorious, but because, as we see in story after story across the ages, from Henry V to Master and Commander to Band of Brothers to Black Hawk Down, It is only in the fires of battle that the truest steel can be forged.
We found in one another a bond that exists only in combat.
Whatever else a man may do, he must, above all, give of himself. He must know what he lives for, and he must know who he would die for. I do find myself wishing not to live in times such as those exactly, as I probably would have died before the age of 5, but I have an undeniable wish that things would be clearer cut. Our modern world is utterly complex and confusing. Evil hides in every corner, and it's so hard to figure out how to even begin to fight it. The early 1800s were undoubtedly simpler times, but that wasn't always a bad thing. If you want to see my take on a vision of what a decidedly more complicated world would look like, check out this video on Cyberpunk 2077 that I made for my Philosophy of Games channel. And consider supporting me on Patreon. I have a dream of making this my full-time job, and every new member brings me a little closer to that goal. Thank you for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next one.